United Nations, a Soviet apparatus. In May 1937, the State Department reported that the Soviets had installed secret eavesdropping microphones in the U.S. Embassy at Moscow. In May 1964, the State Department reported that the whole American embassy was wired to recording machines of the Soviet secret police. In June 1964, the State Department announced a new consular agreement with the Soviets, which will, of course, give the Soviets wider access to American security matters. Conditions at UN headquarters give even more shocking evidence of State Department indifference to communist outrages against our security. In 1952, a Senate subcommittee discovered many communists among American UN employees. A more recent case reveals the gruesome truth that the UN is used as a cover and vehicle for worldwide communist operations. That is a summary of my report on United Nations, a Soviet apparatus. The full report after a message from my sponsor. In May 1937, the State Department reported that secret eavesdropping microphones installed by the Soviets had been discovered in the U.S. Embassy at Moscow. 27 years later, May 1964, the State Department reported a new discovery. The whole U.S. Moscow Embassy, including living quarters for personnel, was wired for the Soviet secret police to record every word spoken. In June 1964, less than 2 weeks after State Department announcement about this communist bugging of our embassy in Moscow, State Department and Soviet officials signed a new consular agreement. How many American consular offices will be established to provide Soviet secret police additional access to American security matters? How many Soviet consular offices will be established in the United States to provide new centers of communist propaganda, spying, and sabotage? The public has not been given these details. Conditions at United Nations headquarters in New York give even more shocking evidence of State Department indifference to communist outrages against our security interests. In 1952, a Senate subcommittee discovered many communists among American employees at the UN. The UN Administrative Tribunal said they could not be fired because they were communists. In a more recent case, the same UN tribunal approved the firing of an anti-communist, Paul Bang-Jensen. Bang-Jensen is a close equivalent of the Danish pronunciation of that name. Bang-Jensen, a career diplomat who loved the UN, was a senior political affairs officer. In November 1956, a Soviet national assigned to UN headquarters in New York told Bang-Jensen that the Soviet political police had secret agents not only in the UN Secretariat, but also in American intelligence agencies. The Soviet wanted this information given to American authorities in exchange for political asylum in the United States. He wanted Bang-Jensen to get word about him and his information directly to President Eisenhower or to Allen Dulles, head of the CIA. Bang-Jensen tried but never succeeded. Both FBI and CIA said they could not act without State Department authorization. Nothing was ever done. The potential defector, never permitted to divulge the information about communist spies in the UN and in the U.S. government, was recalled to the Soviet Union. Bang-Jensen's disillusionment began with the failure of his beloved UN to help or even encourage Hungarian freedom fighters trying to throw off the dreadful yoke of Soviet tyranny in 1956. As a sop to American public opinion, the UN General Assembly voted to create a committee to find out what had happened in Hungary, January 10, 1957, weeks after the Soviets had suppressed the Hungarian revolt. Bang-Jensen was made Deputy Secretary of a staff to help this UN committee. His job was to screen Hungarian refugees for testimony. The refugees had no confidence in any UN agency because they were convinced that the UN is run for the Soviets, by the Soviets, and by their sympathizers. Bang-Jensen himself was having growing doubts about the UN, especially after he discovered that UN officials had posted 2 communist guards outside the offices of the UN committee that was investigating communist atrocities in Hungary, and that in Geneva, a Soviet citizen was made committee translator. Nonetheless, Bang-Jensen obtained important testimony for the UN committee by promising witnesses never to reveal their names to the UN Secretariat or to anyone else. When committee hearings were completed, Bang-Jensen helped write a report. After examining drafts of the report which omitted important information and contained conspicuous errors, Bang-Jensen concluded that the UN committee report was being sabotaged and garbled to give the Soviets a means of ridiculing it. Bang-Jensen's superior on the UN staff recommended that Bang-Jensen be relieved of duty because he was a very sick man. This is the first effort on record of UN efforts to impugn Bang-Jensen's sanity because of his anti-communist stand. Eventually, Dag Hammarskjöld appointed Ralph Bunche to investigate Bang-Jensen's allegations that the UN Hungary Committee had been sabotaged to protect the Soviets. Bunche, refusing even to hear Bang-Jensen's evidence, reported, quote, "Bang-Jensen is mentally ill, not far from a state of mind which could lead to physical violence, either to himself or to others," end quote. On October 9, 1957, UN officialdom ordered Bang-Jensen to give the names of Hungarian witnesses to Dragoslav Protic, an Assistant Secretary General of the UN who was a communist under control of the Soviets. Bang-Jensen refused. He did not want to keep the list of names himself. He wanted authority to burn it so the Soviets could never get it. A committee headed by Ernest A. Gross, who was not a UN employee, investigated and recommended that Bang-Jensen be fired for grave misconduct. Prominent anti-communists who knew Bang-Jensen and who knew all the details of the whole affair called the Gross Committee report a scurrilous and cowardly attack, an effort to conceal the gruesome truth that the UN was used as a cover and vehicle for worldwide communist operations. On July 3, 1958, Bang-Jensen was fired from the UN. James Wadsworth, official in the American UN delegation, hastened to make a public statement praising the UN action against him. On Monday morning, November 23, 1959, Bang-Jensen left his home in Lake Success and headed for work at his new job with CARE in New York City. He was seen walking toward a waiting bus, but never seen again until 3 days later, when his body was found on a bridle path in Alley Pond Park about 5 miles from his home. Police quickly concluded that Bang-Jensen had committed suicide because a gun belonging to him and a suicide note were found with the body, and because of information that Bang-Jensen had been mentally ill with suicidal tendencies. Now, this information came from the UN and was wholly false. A psychiatrist who had seen Bang-Jensen 6 times after his dismissal from the UN said later, quote, "It is utter nonsense to imply that Bang-Jensen was mentally unbalanced. I could very well believe there was dirty work behind his death. I have difficulty believing it was suicide. It was not in his makeup. He was possibly the most intelligent man I ever knew," end quote. Other facts make it impossible for many to believe that Bang-Jensen committed suicide. Medical examination of the body fixed the time of death sometime Wednesday morning. Hence, if the case were suicide, the body would have lain in that bridle path all afternoon Wednesday and all Wednesday night. Yet a Senate subcommittee witness testified that on Wednesday afternoon, he walked his dog down that bridle path and back again, and that Bang-Jensen's body was not there. Public and congressional concern prompted an investigation by the Senate Internal Security Subcommittee, which concluded that conditions in the UN adversely affect the security of the United States. Concerning Bang-Jensen's death, the Senate Subcommittee said, quote, "If Bang-Jensen did not commit suicide, he was the victim of political murder dressed up as suicide. There has been a long list of suicides under highly questionable circumstances involving people who might have had knowledge about which the Kremlin had reason to be sensitive. The Soviets have highly developed techniques for simulating suicide. A convincing suicide may take a year or 2 to prepare. During this period, the subject's life is examined minutely. Stories may be circulated to the press that the subject is despondent. This prepares the ground for a plausible suicide story when the deed occurs," end quote. The invisible government, a tangled skein of organizations centered on the Council on Foreign Relations, aims to make the United States a socialist province of a socialist one world. American membership in the United Nations with subordination of American policy to UN policy is the biggest step ever taken toward the invisible government's goal. Support of the United Nations is the premier project of the Council on Foreign Relations and its interlocking affiliates. Hence, Bang Jensen had to be destroyed because he was hurting the United Nations. The Senate subcommittee seems to believe, and I certainly do, that communists murdered Bang Jensen. But communists did not betray him. A man cannot be betrayed by his enemies. Bang Jensen was betrayed by his fellow liberals, by Americans who are members of the Council on Foreign Relations and of the American Association for the United Nations, which the CFR runs. Andrew Cordier, Ralph Bunche, Ernest Gross, James Wadsworth, Clark Eichelberger, Henry Cabot Lodge, Allen Dulles, all who had some part in the Bang Jensen affair are members of the Council on Foreign Relations. 3 months before his death, Bang Jensen made remarks which all Americans should think about and not forget. He expressed bitter realization that the UN is a Soviet apparatus created to serve the Soviet cause. He expressed doubts about the survival of the United States, with the United Nations providing in New York City a privileged sanctuary for the murderous intrigue of international communism. Bang Jensen said, "You Americans are so full of optimism and good fellowship, you don't want to think ill of anyone. Because I confided in one of your security agencies, a man is dead now. What hope can you have of winning the battle when your own FBI cannot even cross First Avenue in New York and expose the traitors amongst you? It is bureaucracy gone mad." Goodbye. God bless you.